Hi, everybody. This is Dean Bell with Dean Kevin, and we're on the New Education Show. And this is a show to educate everybody about what's going on. We bring in bits of information and awareness for you to consider. Tartarian idea of history, where we have this idea that history has been reset or changed to suit the controllers and the conquerors. And I just wanted to give you an alternative view about how we see things. You know, oftentimes we just accept what we hear in the radio or news, TV, or read in a book. We just automatically accept it. But, you know, if you really look at some of these things, especially like in history, how things just don't make sense if you really look at it closely. We just kind of glaze over it a lot of times, what we're told. But so again, history is whatever, you know, it's just a reference, but we go over this just to give you an idea how we've been hoodwinked into, you know, seeing the world in a certain way, which it really isn't. And so it just behooves you to see, you know, what's really going on. It's to your advantage and to your benefit if you go and study some of this stuff, so you can become more aware of what's going on really in the world, because it's so much of a deception that people can't even go there with their imagination. It's so huge. So lately we've been having fun with it. You know, we've done the conspiracy theory stuff a lot. So lately we've been doing some humorous activities, such as the multi-dimensional historical Jeopardy show. We had three shows of that, just to give people another viewpoint with added humor, because it can be very serious, because this is our lives, so we're being destroyed here. But add a little humor. It can always be fun, especially if you know what's going on and you become more aware. If you're on that track, you're in better shape. And we're here for everybody. Give them the opportunity to wake up to something real and have a real purpose in their life. So what else with this railroad, before I leave the railroad situation? Yeah, all the metal, all the transportation, if you consider that they had the horse and buggy to transport these rails, that's all they had, miles and miles away, plus manufacture them. What kind of industry did they have in the 1830s, 40s? Did they have steel manufacturing industry then? And moving the dirt, like John Levy, who's the one of the main guys here. John Levy is his YouTube channel has a lot here on the Tartarians. Moving all this dirt, this soil and dirt around, drilling through tunnels, going over ravines, over the mountains, the Sierras, through the snow, the weather. It's just an awesome, work. And these are Chinese laborers, blacks, Irish, these immigrants that supposedly just basically laborers. So I assume they didn't have a lot of skill. So the engineering feat, who engineered all this, and through all the United States here, which we're talking about, it's just pretty amazing and rather unbelievable. So just for your consideration, I bring this up. Okay, so I'll give it over to Kevin. Hi, Kevin. What's up today with you?
Okay, well, I'll touch briefly on what you were just speaking about in regards to the Tartaria. I wrote a few things as you were speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, as you were saying, the most telling indicator of the world being slightly different to what we have been told that it is of course all the architecture the world over, as it seems to be very identical and seems to be of a very similar theme and design. And I've heard endless accounts and documentaries of how where information has been gleaned that is actually accurate, not doctored. But when people first came to these countries, if they visited them or apparently discovered them, where in fact probably everything was already discovered, but they said they just came into these places and all this structure was already in place. Not only the buildings, but all the aqueducts, all the underground sewage systems, all the tunnels, it was just there and they simply acquired it. And I mean, Max Egan does a lot of research into this as well. He's the Australian individual who does his Crow House site and is on BitChute and was kicked off of YouTube. But he said that literally the entire world over, there is another world probably about several meters below the ground. And in any country, anybody does any extensive excavation work, you'll literally find layers of buildings and streets just literally under your feet. And as you mentioned on a previous show, it does seem that 1820 seems to be the time when some great situation occurred. It seems to be along the lines of mud floods that seem to have covered the world over, which covered over what the world was. And then they built on the surface, but made use of the structures already in place. And it's quite interesting as well, because a lot of people have produced photographs around the mid-1800s, which show what they call orphan trains or foundlings, which seem to be in a situation where, as almost putting it together, there was great cataclysmic world upheavals, which covered the world in great mud floods, almost caused a physical level reset. But it seemed that the survivors seemed to have been children, as though they were removed from danger. And then when everything resettled, they were brought back and were used as the next generation of the human slaves almost. And there's no end of pictures people have unearthed of just masses of children, but no adults in sight. Just they call them the foundlings, and they would basically, back then, they were distributing these children all over the world, sharing them between all the countries that had been decimated of their populations. And everyone says, where do these children come from? And for me, it's very possible then, if this was a dark force orchestrated cataclysm, then it's very possible they didn't want to wipe out their entire slave species, and they actually took the children possibly off planet, and when it all settled down, they brought them back again, and they rewrote history up until 1820, and presumably then that is all contrived. I mean, there's no reason why it hasn't happened in some other dimensional version of Earth, but as it would appear, certainly not in this timeline. And very interesting, well, Max Egan would mention the Varmanika Shastra, which is ancient Indian texts, and they speak of the Vimanas, which are Indian flying craft. Basically, if you read this book or look through it, it is more or less a flight manual and describes in great detail the mechanics of these flying machines and how they operated, and they were in fact capable of becoming invisible. And this is a book that was written thousands and thousands of years ago by all accounts. So again, it indicates these flying machines were in operation on the Earth. And I often bring up the case as well, like mentioning the buildings and how difficult they would be to build. Also the lighthouses as well. And there are structural engineers of this day who said it would be impossible to ship all the materials to a random bit of rock in the middle of the ocean and build these lighthouses. They said even with today's technology and capabilities, they wouldn't be able to do it. And yet these lighthouses have been kicking around for several hundred years. So again, this is more evidence of a world before the one that we know. And you mentioned before the show, you mentioned about the maps as well. And they were saying how there are various maps that were discovered. I think the Piri Reis one is the most well known. There are various other ones, maps written in the 1400s. I believe there was a sea captain who had access to this Piri Reis map. Where he got it, who knows? But they seem to show mapped the entire world continents theoretically before they had been discovered and were known. And the thing is with maps as well and cartography, I mean, the only way to make accurate maps are you have to do it from the air. So again, this suggests they had access to flying technology to be able to do that. And there were also maps unearthed which depict Antarctica before it was even covered in ice, that would suggest a map that was written, if the official histories are correct, who knows how many thousands of years ago before Antarctica. If I remember correctly, that it was believed, according to official histories, that Antarctica was always ice-bound, but then they found this map which depicted Antarctica as being a sort of a tropical wilderness. And then when a team went to investigate into Antarctica, they actually found evidence of these trees. And so it proved that not only was Antarctica used to be a forestry region, but also somebody had mapped it at the point when it was. And again, they must have done it from the air and before the time when it became icebound. It was only because of this map that inspired people to think to possibly entertain the notion that this place was a sort of forestry region, and then go and prove that. And what was my last little point? About the I mean, in England we have a structure. It's they said it was built by the Druids. It's called Stonehenge, and it's really an observatory really for mapping the stars. But again, the stones that used to build it were transported all the way from Wales, which in this country would have been about 400 miles from where it actually is. And these stones again are absolutely gigantic, weigh multiple tons. And they claimed they were transported by rolling them across logs, placing a load of logs in one of the other and trundling along these logs across 400 miles of rugged terrain, etc. And it's actually quite interesting as well, because it's actually been suggested that these stones that make up Stonehenge are actually the remnants of giants, the giant bones and joints, and they've solidified, calcified, or they've become what was the other thing? It's not silicon based, and even the names of some of the stones are very telling. One is called the heel stone, for example, so they're more or less telling you what's going on, suggesting that that may well be the case. But they're the things I wanted to say in regards to what you just shared. And
regarding Antarctica, just we know Admiral Byrd went there to explore, and when he came back, he gave a couple of interviews, and then he got sick pretty soon after he got back, and he died. So, basically, they didn't want him to tell people what he saw, which he did see, this tropical, trees and everything. And this goes along with the flat Earth theory, where, there's kind of a wall there, and there's all the governments of the world have an agreement that they don't go there, except for the scientists who are doing research there. But see, all this stuff is fun just to look at, and to see fit it together, because it does fit together. All these things are not random conspiracy theories. I mean, things seem to fit together if you research them and look at them objectively. They seem to make sense in a certain way. But again, we're indifferent in respect. We're indifferent to them. It's just a reference to something that we're not being told, what's really going on. And that's what we're here for, to help people to see what is really going on. That's your purpose, basically, here to wake up to everything, not just physical, but all of creation, and to get, you could say, beyond it, or be indifferent to it, so that you're not the effect, but more conscious cause and conscious effect. That there's just so much more to life than the drudgery that we've been restricted to here. So that's why we're here. Thanks, Kevin. That's good commentary. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember a lot of Admiral Byrd's information, and he said apparently found a way through the great boundary, what seemed to be a wall, and he would discover various other continents, some the size of America. And so it does suggest there is a lot of the world that the slaves are not being made aware of. So who knows what's going on there. And I did look at this flat Earth stuff as well, and personally, I came to the conclusion that it's not so much, I think, that the Earth is flat, although they have some very compelling theories. I just think the world is far bigger than we're told it is, and that would account for a lot of the anomalies that the flat Earth people have found, but personally I can't say for certain what the shape of the Earth is, and I suppose it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just a simulation for our experience, and so what the shape is. But one of the things the flat earthers did say in regards to the railway tracks as well, the fact that they were placed miles and miles and miles across the land, they said if the Earth is round and it is of the diameter we are told that it is, the tracks would have to be designed in such a way that would accommodate for the curvature of the Earth. Otherwise, you'd be dealing with a situation where, as the Earth curves, the train would be like going up into the sky. And when the flat Earth people interviewed a lot of these people who knew about train tracks, they would actually say, no, we don't make any adjustments whatsoever. They're all the same size, the same shape, the same and such. And so theoretically, if you for every so many miles of track, the Earth would presumably be curving by so many inches or such, and you would have to take that into account if you made a railway track beyond that certain distance. And of course, some of the railway tracks go hundreds and hundreds of miles. That's quite interesting as well. Then again, that could again suggest that the Earth is much bigger than we're told it is, which could account for that. Then again, I found that was one of the flat Earth theories, the most compelling theories amongst many. But yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
But today I had something. I have a book, and it's called Secret Mars: The Alien Connection by M.J. Craig. And I thought I'd read a bit out of this regarding the face on Mars. So I'm sure most people are at least aware of that, because that's quite a common, a common anomaly that is brought up in regards to what NASA have filmed and then try and suppress and cover up and explain in various pathetic ways that don't hold much water. Anyway, the following information was sourced from the book Secret Mars: The Alien Connection by M.J. Craig. The Face on Mars. In 1976, the American space program sent the Viking mission to the planet Mars with the bold intention of searching for life. They sent 2 orbiting spacecraft to map and photograph the planet in detail, and 2 landers to conduct experiments with soil samples. The experiments were designed to detect the presence of any microorganisms that might be living in the Martian soil. However, NASA scientists and authorities decided that the results of the experiments were inconclusive, and the mission to search for life, therefore, a failed one. Several scientists still contend that the Viking data supports evidence of microbial activity, even to the extent of circadian rhythms being present. But officially and politically, that was the end of the Mars exploration adventure, until 1991, when the Americans sent the Mars Observer spacecraft to image the planet in much higher detail than the Viking cameras had been capable of. However, communication terminated with the craft just before it entered orbit, and that mission was declared lost. In between these missions, however, something very interesting had happened back on the Earth. In the summer of 1976, Toby Owen, a member of the imaging team looking for a safe landing site for the approaching Viking Lander 2, and while examining recent photos of the Martian surface, came across one frame in particular, 35A72, which looked remarkably like a human face. It was found in a northern Martian desert called Cydonia Mensae. Later, it was shown to the world's press and presented by project scientist Jerry Soffen as a trick of light and shadow. He went on to say that when a picture of it was taken a few hours later, it all went away. In actual fact, there was no picture taken a few hours later. This whole area was in darkness. It was night. The scientist had seen no picture and had simply made a presumption. However, the journalists, knowing no better, dutifully accepted what he said, and for 3 years it was completely forgotten about. However, in 1982, 2 imaging engineers, Vincent Di Pietro and Greg Molinar, began studying the image of the face, wondering if there might be more to it than just a random geological formation that resembled humanoid facial features. They decided that the existence of a second image would provide some basis for analysis, so Di Pietro and Molinar began a search for and eventually found one that had been misfiled. Taken at a different lighting angle, it enabled them to begin a scientific evaluation so as to verify if it was indeed just a trick of light and shadow, as NASA had claimed. Their research, however, began to reveal that there was far more to this object than could easily be dismissed as an illusion of nature. Over a mile long, the striking symmetry of the object, with an apparent left and right side, together with what appeared to be facial characteristics depicting eye sockets, nose, mouth area, and all in the correct proportional and positional relationships. And they gave then serious thought to ponder that this object may well be the product of intelligent design, that some ancient Martian face had actually created it. At this point, you might wonder why NASA themselves had not considered it worthwhile to make a study of this image. Remember that NASA was then, and still is, the world's leading space agency, studying other planets in our solar system on behalf of humanity. Their integrity and curiosity must be presumed to be intense to deserve this mantle, and yet, on the single most important potential discovery in our solar system, possible evidence of an intelligent extraterrestrial presence, they appeared to be not the slightest bit interested. And this was very strange indeed, especially given the unimaginable breakthroughs possible, if indeed alien artifacts were to be found on another planet in our solar system. What could be learnt from such a fantastic discovery? What potential benefits could enhance human knowledge? And on a purely rudimentary level, what would the discovery of an ancient alien monument do for NASA's space exploration budget? Well, Di Pietro and Molinar went on to find other objects in the Cydonia area with unusual characteristics. In particular, a five-sided mountain that came to be known as the D and M Pyramid, named after its discoverers.
Okay, so what's going on with this face? How do you see it?
Well, actually, it was quite interesting because they brought out a movie. I can't remember when it was. It wasn't that long ago, and it was called Mission to Mars. And it would start off as though it was a standard NASA mission, and then the crew would stumble across the pyramids and the face. And in that movie, they depicted the face as being almost like an entranceway into a deep into the into the deeper parts of Mars, and it almost opened up like a sort of doorway. And so I mean, personally, I just think, I mean, the architecture on Mars, and they found all sorts of anomalies. They found sort of structures, obviously the pyramids. They found what looked to be very Egypt-like statues and such. And there are remarkable similarities between the architecture that they found there, the design of what they found, and that which you find in Egypt. So obviously suggesting a similar source. And so it's just a case, I would say, that, well, just like the people of the earth depict their presidents and their politicians and whoever else is considered famous by putting statues and images of them up, like the Mount Rushmore, etc. I think it's just a case of that, really. I suspect that the face on Mars is just the beings that were there, which are still there, but are now underground, by all accounts. I think they were just paying homage to one of their leaders, and I think that's what that face represents, personally.
Duane and I were just watching a documentary on the Mount Rushmore last night about the four presidents there, the huge sculpture depicting Washington, Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, and Jefferson. And again, one of these cases where supposedly in 1929, I think it was, or so, when, just before the Depression, there's no money, and they government helped sponsor the sculpture. Why this is in the time where everything, people were starving and no jobs and stuff. Why would they fund this, help fund it? I mean, it was a private sculptor and his son who did it. And if you look at the size of these things, and the intricacy of the nose and the facial features and everything, it just doesn't make sense that. And then they show pictures of people with basically a hammer and a chisel, up there on these scaffolds using dynamite. It just doesn't make sense how. So there's something to that too. Mount Rushmore and the faces there. I haven't really discovered anything yet, but that could be something too. There's something to that. Why would this be built? There's something behind it. There's always something behind these things. So it's interesting. No, it's interesting. Well, thanks for bringing that up. And so we're part of the New Presentation Foundation. We're three beings of light that just are sharing what is going on here as how we see it. We don't have an agenda. We're not a path or teaching. We're just sharing what we see. And the way we close our shows is with the NUUU. This is a song we sing to connect to the reality that just is. You can't really say anything about it. This isness that just is. Life just is. So this connects you to it, this isness. hard to explain, but study. If you do a little studying and research, you'll catch on. It may take you a few years, but if you're sincere, you can catch on to what's going on here with what we're presenting. NUUU. Kevin. Thanks, Kevin.